In this episode, we're going to take a look at one of the best eras for trucks ever, the muscle trucks of the 1990s. The SVT Lightning, the 454 SS, and of course, the Ferrari-beating GMC Cyclone. Plus, a couple amazing trucks you've probably never heard of. Or maybe you have. I don't know. Why do these insane high-performance trucks even exist? And will we ever see anything like them ever again? Thanks to Dazzle Pro for sponsoring this week's episode. If you're like me, you probably haven't been to the dentist in a while, but you also live in fear of losing your teeth and having to drink all your meals. It's a real fear of mine. I have nightmares where my teeth fall out of my mouth on a date and I can only drink milk and smoothies for the rest of my life. But thanks to Dazzle Pro's electric sonic toothbrush, I don't have to worry about either losing my teeth or going to the dentist. Not only does it keep my chompers healthy, but it comes with a UV light that sanitizes the toothbrush head, killing 99% of germs on the brush head. It's really nice to know that I have a clean toothbrush head every time I brush my teeth. Honestly, I adore my Dazzle Pro. I love this thing. It's affordable. I've never had a toothbrush this nice. I didn't really see the hype in electric toothbrushes until I used the Dazzle Pro. I'm a believer. This thing is really cool, and it's just a great way to start your day off right. To get your teeth as clean as mine, enter code DM62 at the link in the description for 50% off. 50% off, guys. That's amazing. Support the companies that support Donuts so we can keep making dope content and keep our teeth clean. Hashtag clean teeth gang. Up until the 1970s, there were not many high-performance trucks that made it to production. And if they did, the performance parts typically bolstered things like payload and towing capacity.
The 1960 Chevrolet trucks are years ahead of any others in durability, and they haul loads faster.
They were never really built for flat-out speed. If you wanted a powerful truck back then, you had to modify it yourself, which, to be fair, a lot of people did. I mean, that's how monster trucks started. I think we should do a whole video on monster trucks. Let me know in the comments if that's something you'd want to see. My point is, most trucks were used strictly for work back then, and the lifestyle truck didn't really exist, but that was all about to change. During the 60s, people started using trucks as daily drivers and not just work vehicles, and truck manufacturers took notice. Eventually, they started releasing super sick high-end trim levels for their most popular trucks in small numbers. They were called trick trucks, and manufacturers competed to have the coolest versions. These trick trucks had amazing names like the Jeep Honcho, the Dude, the Dodge Warlock, the Bo James, and the Gentleman Jim. What's up with all these James/Jim cars? Where's the Nolan wide-body wide boy edition? SM my damn H. Many of these trucks were just appearance packages, with things like fancy graphics on the sides, bucket seats, and interiors upholstered by Levi's jeans. I'm not kidding. By the early 1970s, muscle cars were choked by emission standards and went from having tons of power to being anemic within a couple years. One of the reasons this happened was because of the mandated use of catalytic converters. The catalytic converters of the 70s helped reduce toxic gas emissions, but they also suck down power quicker than a case of Code Red at a Halo 3 all-nighter. I really want to play Griffball right now. That'd be amazing. Anyway, this led to an era of horrible cars like the Mustang II or the Barracuda with a slant 6. These just big, sludgy behemoths. But Dodge, cunning like a ram, found a loophole. Cars were required to have catalytic converters, but trucks were exempt from the law as long as they were over 6,100 pounds. So for the 1978 model year, Dodge took their half-ton D-Series platform and dropped in a 360 cubic inch 5.9 liter LA V8 that was used in police interceptors under the hood. Upgrades included high-flow heads, a 4-barrel carb, and most importantly, no catalytic converters, and the result was the Lil Red Express. This truck had two huge vertical stack exhaust pipes like a big rig, it had wood paneling, and a big old decal on the door. It straight up looked like a toy, which is fitting because Dodge had previously released a whole line of adult toys trucks. Sus, which included the Warlock. Now you might say, Nolan, 6,100 pounds, that's a thick boy. But despite its weight, the Lil Red Express was quick as hell. The 225 horsepower it produced was 5 more than the Pontiac Trans Am of that year. Car and Driver tested a bunch of performance cars, such as the Trans Am, Porsche 924, and Corvette in a 0 to 100 test, and the Little Red Express beat every single one of them. In fact, the Little Red Express was the fastest production American vehicle to 100 miles per hour in 1978. That's impressive on many levels, the biggest one being the truck had the aerodynamics of a brick. Towards the end of the 80s, after engine technology had gotten significantly better, the Big Three started experimenting again with fast trucks. Carroll Shelby worked with Dodge to make the Shelby Dakota. This performance truck traded the 3.9-liter V6 from the stock Dakota for a fuel-injected 5.2-liter V8 sporting a blacked-out grille, sweet graphics, and a freaking cool little triangle thing on the back. It wasn't super fast compared to nowadays standards, making do with 175 horsepower and 270 foot-pounds of torque, but it was the highest-performing production truck next to the Little Red Express. Dodge actually made a convertible Dakota during the late 80s as a collaboration with the American Sunroof Company. Remember that name because it's going to pop up again later. The Shelby Dakota, which was Carroll's first rear-wheel drive car in almost a decade, helped kick off what would become one of the best eras for trucks in the history of truckdom. Over at Lamborghini, they were designing their own muscle truck for the Italian military. After a few different prototypes, the Raging Bull started producing small numbers of the LM002, an off-road brute with a 5.2-liter V12 from the Countach. I think we gotta pause and kind of acknowledge how crazy that is. I love Lamborghini, man. Meanwhile, Ford had a hot truck in the works called the Ranger Show. This super high output Ranger was developed with Roush Racing and had the 3-liter Show Iron Block V6 putting out 200 horses and 200 foot-pounds of torque at 4,800 RPM. That's a perfect horse pork. The boys at Roush threw in a T5 manual transmission from the Mustang GT, and keep in mind, the Ranger was still a small truck at this point. All that fun stuff packed into a mini truck would have been a collector's item by now, but sadly, the Show Ranger never made it to production, although a few concept vehicles were sent out to be tested by car magazines. It's sad that it didn't make it. Putting a big engine in a relatively small package wasn't a new idea. GM engineers in the late 80s, however, were trying to figure out a way to make a truck version of one of the sickest 80s sleeper cars, the Buick Grand National. The highest performance Grand National, dubbed the GNX, had a turbocharged 3.8-liter V6 capable of an insane 360 foot-pounds of torque and 276 horsepower. A Grand National truck would have been amazing, but the car was being phased out in 1987, and Buick wasn't really a badge that made trucks, so they said no. Eventually, it was GMC who agreed they could use a Halo truck, but opted to go with a cheaper engine than the Turbo 6. The result was the Syclone. Built on the S10 compact truck platform shared with the GMC Sonoma, this 3,600-pound four-wheel drive sport truck has a 4.3-liter turbocharged Vortec V6 under the hood, making 280 horsepower and 350 foot-pounds of torque. It could be modified to handle 20 plus pounds of boost. The Syclone looks sporty and low for a truck, distancing itself from other trucks that touted their off-road capabilities. The Syclone wasn't for going off-road. It didn't even like doing work, really. With a short bed and a payload of only 500 pounds, it wouldn't have been able to do much work if it tried. GMC even said that towing was not recommended. But what the Syclone lacked in payload, it made up for in flat-out speed. Car and Driver tested it in 1991 against a Ferrari 348, and the Syclone smoked the Italian stallion to 60 miles an hour. The Syclone posted a 5.3 second 0 to 60, which was insanely fast for a truck, even by today's standards. But after 60 miles per hour, the aerodynamics of the Square Boy truck proved detrimental, and the Ferrari ended up beating the Syclone in the quarter mile, unfortunately. But honestly, the unthinkable had already been achieved. They even made 10 Cyclones in collaboration with, you guessed it, the American Sunroof Company that had a convertible top and a Marlboro livery. These trucks are the holy grail for Cyclone fans. These things are so sick. You gotta love the early 90s Marlboro branding, even if cigarettes are responsible for millions of deaths per year. Despite doing modest numbers of both the Syclone and the Typhoon, just short of 5,000 total, the article that Car and Driver came out with brought this muscle truck into the mainstream and made everyone realize how cool the idea of a fast street truck is. And the idea caught on. Over at Chevrolet, engineers took a new gen C1500 truck, internally known as the GMT 400, and stuffed one of their biggest engines in it, the 454 cubic inch 7.4 liter V8. Later versions of the 454 SS made 255 horsepower and a massive 405 foot-pounds of torque in a relatively small package. You gotta remember that trucks are massive now compared to trucks back then. And even the full-size trucks of yesteryear are smaller than what we consider small trucks today. All that power in the 454 kicked in at around 1600 RPM, which helped the truck achieve a 0 to 60 time of 7.7 seconds, on par with the Mustang GT of that era, but you wouldn't know it from the outside. The 454 SS, unlike the Cyclone, looked like any other truck on the road at the time, and the only defining features were the blacked-out grille, a red bow tie, and the 454 SS logo on the back. It's pretty much a sleeper. You would never know that this was a muscle truck with a massive engine and Bilstein shocks if you're just a casual fan. Ford saw all of this playing out at GM and realized that a halo truck of their own could bring attention to the rest of their truck line. After all, they had the best-selling truck in America with the F-150 and thus had a market share to protect. So they looked to the high-performance division of Ford, SVO, to take the reins on this new project. In 1993, Ford's Special Vehicle Operations debuted the first-generation Ford SVT Lightning. So the Blue Oval's biggest competition with this new truck was the 454 SS, mainly because the Cyclone was virtually unbeatable, and it didn't make too much sense from a business perspective to produce something that could compete with that. Mainly because it would cost a ton of money to develop, and they didn't plan on selling very many of these performance trucks. A truck that could compete with the 454, however, was a much more attainable goal. They took a full-sized 9th gen F-150, put extensive suspension and handling upgrades in it, and dropped a 5.8 liter V8 under the hood. Engineers upgraded the stock headers to cast iron cylinder heads from the GT40 of all cars. They installed high-flow ports and tuned the engine to make 240 horses with 240 foot-pounds of torque. That's a horse pork. The Lightning was 2.5 inches lower than a stock F-150 and had Formula GP shocks up front and both a front and rear anti-roll bar for better handling. Unlike the Cyclone, the SVT Lightning maintained almost all of the payload capabilities of the F-150 and a tow limit of 5,000 pounds. It was still a truck that you could drive like a Mustang. Although it was close to 3 seconds slower to 60 than the Cyclone, the suspension upgrades helped the Lightning to handle better than both the Cyclone and the 454 SS. The first-gen Lightning would go on to sell almost 12,000 units, more than the Cyclone, but 5,000 fewer than the 454 SS. Following the debut of the Lightning in '93, the high-performance muscle truck market was solidified as a legitimate niche scene. But one company was noticeably silent during these first few years these trucks were popping up. But that's because they were in the basement mixing up some medicine. For a couple of years, from 1998 on, Dodge offered a high-performance version of their Dakota with a 360 cubic inch Magnum V8 under the hood. They also bolstered handling by dropping it an inch from stock Dakota height. It had a quick ratio steering box and heavy-duty front and rear sway bars. The Dakota RT could do a 7-second 0 to 60 on street tires, but many RT owners put slicks on it and hit the drag strip. Around the same time, Dodge had a concept truck called the Sidewinder. It was a hot rod looking truck with an 8-liter V10 from the Viper GTSR making 640 horsepower. Supposedly the truck could get to 170 miles per hour, but it never went into production. I can already imagine me and the boys looking cool as heck cruising around one of these things. I'm driving, James is sitting shotgun, got Jeremiah and Job in the back. It's a good day. I miss my boys. These high-performance trucks paved the way for all the super amazing trucks we got in the 2000s and 2010s. The second-gen Lightning, my personal favorite, the SRT-10, my also personal favorite, the Trackhawk, the Silverado SS Intimidator. When there's competition between brands, we the consumers reap the benefits. If I keep talking about these cool-ass trucks, I'm probably gonna wanna buy one. So before I get tempted to boot up Craigslist, that's where I'll leave you today. Trucks are great. To the viewer who suggested I comb my hair before I film one of these videos, no. I'm representing for all the curly boys out there, all the thick boys out there. For something a little different, check out this episode of Wheelhouse on Vans. Follow Donut on all social media at Donut Media. Follow me at Nolan J. Sykes for the ongoing ramblings of a madman in progress. Be nice. I'll see you next time.